Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Accessibility Talks. Accessibility Talks is a monthly virtual meetup where we come together to discuss topics around all things website accessibility. I'm your host, Carrie Fisher, but the real star of each meetup is a speaker of the month who will present an in-depth accessibility topic to the group, after which there'll be some time to ask questions and discuss. If you have questions for our speaker today, please post them in the chat window or tag them on Twitter with the hashtag A11yTalks, spelled A11yTalks. This month, we're happy to have the unapologetically awesome Melanie Sumner as our guest speaker. Melanie is an application architect for JP Morgan Chase. She's an accessibility advocate, Ember JS core team member, and meetup organizer in Chicago, and judge at CSS Design Awards. Melanie will be talking today about ambitious accessibility. Welcome, Melanie.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
We're happy that you're here too. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and start presenting.
Okay.
And anyone who has questions, again, put it in the chat window or tag it on Twitter.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'm so excited to be here today and talk with everybody about ambitious accessibility. The tagline for Ember is the framework for building ambitious applications. And I wanted to really lean into that idea. When I sat down to write this talk, I tried to write a story. I tried to, how can I make this really personal and really connect? And I thought about doing a live demo of a screen reader. I thought about doing this personal journey through the eyes of someone who has to use assistive technology just to do what they need to do every day. And I couldn't do it. I really tried. It just didn't come. It didn't feel natural. It felt really, this is not me. I'm having a hard time presenting this in an authentic way. So what I thought I would do is actually talk about why accessibility is personal to me, important to me, why I care about it, and I'm hoping that through this journey we can find some things that a lot of different kinds of engineers could also connect with. Because we're the ones that need to be doing this and building this, and that's the kind of ideas I want to present today. So why do I care about accessibility? Part of it's because I get paid to care about accessibility. I'm kind of very lucky there. I get to do Ember, I get to do accessibility, I get to care about web standards, all those kinds of great things, and it's part of my day job. I did care about it before it was my day job, which is kind of what helped me land my day job, but having that, the time to figure this out has really been incredibly beneficial, and really saying, kind of depersonalizing it as much as I can to help present it in a way that's useful for other engineers has proven effective for me. So that's part of it. We build, on my team, we build accessible UI components in what we call an add-on or a library type of thing. And other application developer teams use those components to build their applications. It helps us have accessibility. It helps us to have consistent standards, branding, all those kinds of things. It just makes it easier in an enterprise corporation. But when I first started doing this, we didn't really have good guidance on how to make it accessible. We had this spec, we had people who could engineer, but we needed somebody who could really be the person that fills those maybe artificial gaps, but there's still gaps, that exist between the spec and the engineers. So I became that person. I decided to lean in, I decided to do that and be that person, and that's how I got to care about it so much. And really, I care about accessibility because I care about web standards. I've been doing this June will be 22 years since I first started writing code, and I've discovered that the more I get to know web standards and the spec and the more time I spend with them, I get better at what I do. I can design things and architect things better because I can understand how they're already supposed to work, and that's super helpful. And of course, we know there's an accessibility spec as well. Oh, this is always a mouthful for me. Web Accessibility Initiative for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. So, and this part of the talk may be for a little bit of, for folks who maybe are not quite as familiar with accessibility. So we're gonna run through a few terms just quickly that you might hear me reference as I talk. So what is accessibility? The practice of making your websites usable by as many people as possible. I like the question, can my application be used in the way it was designed and intended to be used? I find that mental model particularly helpful. Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, which is now on version 2.0. And then the different levels of conformance, A, AA, and AAA, which I won't go into since I'm sure we're more familiar with them, but they do exist for those who aren't. The American with Disabilities Act is often referred to as ADA, and other countries like Australia, UK, Portugal, Canada have similar laws. And I'm sorry to any countries I'm leaving out. I know y'all are doing a great job. And then A11y, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see me use this hashtag a lot. If you look at the word accessibility, there's 11 letters between the A and the Y. That's why that exists. One of the reasons I care about accessibility is because the future is now. The future of providing solutions for anybody, for everybody, no matter what their levels of ability are, that's really just exciting to me. Some of the ones I'm really excited about, the in-chroma glasses that allow people that are colorblind to see color. Oh, that's so cool. And if you watch those videos on YouTube, you just get like all the warm feels about it, right? But it's kind of surprising sometimes for engineers to find out things like, well, the in-chroma website says things like, some people don't know that the MacBook power connector changes color, red to green, which that's interesting. I never really thought about that. Or that some colorblind people think that peanut butter is green. That also really surprised me. We're also giving people the ability to hear. An auditory brainstem implant surgery was first done at UNC School of Medicine, and this is the little boy, 3 years old, hearing his father's voice for the first time. Every time I watch this video, I tear up. Just with so much happiness because he's hearing his father's voice. And that is so incredible and just inspires me when I see things like this. There's also some cool things going on at Microsoft. They have their, one of the projects they're doing is this cloud service called Video Indexer. It can do the things you'd expect, provide transcriptions, extract text that appears in the video that isn't spoken, live translate to different languages. The one that interested me though is that it can adjust the language model used for transcription, making it industry or target or market specific. This means you could theoretically make your content more accessible to viewers who need it put in a little bit simpler terms, which that is very cool. And then there's these other projects like Include.ai. This project was started by a student at Stanford who wanted to help his father, who is blind, have better access to image descriptions on the internet. And all of these things help me think, what will I create? And I'd want us all to ask ourselves, what will you create? Because we have so many brilliant creative engineers and creative minds that have the potential to solve hard accessibility problems or hard engineering problems in really ambitious ways. When I see all the advances in technology, I get really inspired. I feel empowered to be curious, to think outside the box. And even in Ember, we have a commitment to innovating and providing accessible solutions. This is our official Ember mascots wearing their universal access t-shirts. On the left is Zoe and on the right is Tomster, which I think is probably the friendliest accessibility mascots I've probably ever seen. But of course I might be a little biased. But these to me represent a tangible commitment to building accessible things in Ember. So we'll talk about Ember in a second. And for those of you who haven't had to work with it, Ember is a JavaScript framework used to build giant applications. And we'll go into that. But first, I think it's important for us to talk about some of the reasons why we might ignore accessibility or be tempted to ignore it. First one, accessibility is emotional. It's easy for us to want to ignore the emotion part or give it less weight. But for our users who need to perform tasks like checking their bank balance and paying their bills or buying a present for their nieces and nephews or children, or they wanted to subscribe to our really awesome new, I don't know, Spotify service or something, and they couldn't because it wasn't accessible. It can all feel kind of, why can't I browse on some websites but not others? There's a lot of feelings of isolation and frustration, and why don't developers care? It's also emotional for developers. We're under pressure to finish projects that have been promised at an unrealistic timeline. We're being told to ship it now and fix it later. But when you think about it, is there ever really a later? And that might lead more to your process where you work. But I know I've had to definitely bring up, hey, you said fix it or ship it now, we'll fix it later. But then you said we can't fix it because it's already shipped. So these are the kinds of things, these are the kinds of pressure that developers are under on a regular basis. Plus we have this, I need to be a ninja rockstar unicorn thing going on that I'm hoping we're getting through. I'm hoping that's going away, but it might still be there because some of that pressure comes from within ourselves. We want to be the best. I don't know about you, but I'm interested in that. It's pretty cool. And that's a lot of pressure. So if you think about all those things, it's understandable almost that accessibility is easy to ignore or is emotional. Accessibility is also difficult to get correct when you're first starting out. And if you've only ever had to write JavaScript, you're just like, what is all of this? I just want to put everything in a div. Like, why can't I just do that? It's easier. I have other things I want to think about. There are some hard problems in building accessible application in JavaScript. And the ones I'm going to talk about next are, these are the ones that I'd like us all to solve no matter what framework we use, no matter where we are. We need to make sure like these things are solved. One of the benefits of Ember is the way it handles routes. The routing story in Ember is probably the inspiration for most of the other routing stories. And it continues to be a benefit in Ember. But one of the challenges is that assistive technology doesn't really pick up on when you click the link to go to a different route, then what happens? There's nothing that really triggers anything in the DOM that tells assistive technology, oh, hey, something new happened. I added in a new subroute or something. So the thing that's the benefit ends up being the thing that also kind of hurts us. And this is something we shouldn't have to hack this to figure it out. We shouldn't have to use one weird trick, because one weird trick, as we all know, is not scalable. Modals, modals. So after my talk at EmberConf earlier this month, some of the Ember community worked on this, and we feel like we're very close to shipping a very accessible modal solution. And it's that getting across that there's a difference between visible focus and screen reader focus, and that when you're doing a modal, you need to trap the focus. That can be a little bit tricky. And that would be really awesome if we could solve that. And especially making sure things have the right roles, and it's inserted into the correct place in the DOM. Those are all like little nuanced bits that we need to solve. ARIA attribute support. This is another one, use HTML5, but if you have other things that need ARIA attribute support, we need to be able to do that easily and simply, and that's not always the case. Another thing is that JavaScript frameworks do is you can attach click actions to everything, or you can attach actions to all the things, which is great, but it's not, because you can attach actions to all the things. And you end up with issues like interactive elements inside of other interactive elements, or I don't know, those kind of things are difficult. And we should figure out how to do this in such a way that it doesn't cause these kinds of issues for our users. Plus, just because you can click on it doesn't mean you can keyboard navigate to it necessarily. And that's something, why are we leaving that out? That's really important. It doesn't, keyboard navigation doesn't help just me or people with accessibility needs go fast. It helps everybody go fast. I love my keyboard shortcuts. And then this is not necessarily an Ember SPA problem, but passwords. This is a big, I'm mentioning it here because I'm hoping that somebody will say, oh, passwords, I didn't realize those were an issue. I totally have an idea for a different way we could do passwords that are secure from the bad guys, but help people who need them have a better solution for them. And then let's share that. Let's get that out there, because if you've ever tried passwords with a screen reader, for those of you who haven't, I'll tell you what it does. It says something like star, 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 star. Super frustrating, right? That doesn't give me any meaningful information that I can use. So it's a tricky problem. Maybe somebody listening or somebody who's watching later will have an idea for that. That's a lot of work though, right? So, and that's just like my top 5 things. That's not all of the things. So that's a super lot of work. But thankfully, there is a superhero here. And it's not me. And I'm not gonna say something cheesy like there's a hero inside all of you, because I don't know if that's true. Web standards. Web standards are the superheroes for accessibility. Web standards give us ways to pick up the easy wins, the accessibility by default. So what does that look like? Use semantic HTML. Use HTML5, use HTML5. I hope you hear this over and over and over again in your head, and anytime you go to reach for a div, when you should be using a native HTML element, I want you to think about me going, use HTML5. Super huge, they gave us the tools we needed. We must use them. Link versus button. If it goes to a route, use a link. If it does a button thing like submit a form or close a modal, use a button. And some people will argue it needs to look like a link or look like a button depending. I'm not so much tied to that one, because I understand kind of the nuance of needing it to, doesn't matter what it looks like. I really want us to focus, especially JavaScript engineers, focus on what's machine readable. And what can we tell the assistive technology to say or indicate for our users? I think that is more important to me than what it looks like. And keyboard navigation. if you can do something with your mouse, you need to be able to do it with your keyboard. And we know what this looks like, or what keyboard navigation looks like. So that should theoretically, no judgment, but it should be a pretty easy win. Anything you can do with a mouse, you should be able to do with a keyboard. And then another easy win is color contrast. There are lots of color contrast checkers out there. You don't even have to write your own. I think in the latest version of Chrome, it's like built in already. So definitely not something you need to figure out. It's already figured out for you. And then image alt text. Add an alt text to your image if it's relevant to the subject. So let's look at that really quick. Alt text. So let's take this image of Elmo. I really should have used like Captain America's shield or something here, but Elmo works too. Look at this image, and is it breaking up a long paragraphs of text about Elmo and the history of Elmo? Probably don't need to use description. You still need to have an empty alt tag and role presentation on there. But if people are going to be shopping, what would they need to think about in order to buy this? And this is a fun exercise to do, and I'm sure we all will come up with something different. I think I went through about 20 drafts of my alt text before deciding on this one. Sorry, that's not quite perfect, but I'm trying to describe what it actually looks like. So if someone isn't looking at it and just hears this description, do they get enough of a mental model in their head to make that decision? So that's a fun exercise to try to do. Of course, despite those few simple, easy wins, quote unquote simple, developers also enjoy arguing. So we've all heard this argument, right? Tabs, no, spaces, no, tabs, fight me. I mean, you could fight about this if you really want to. I never really cared about this particular fight, kind of like Batman versus Superman. They're both superheroes, and I knew the fight was going to be epic, but in the end, I didn't really care which one of them won, kind of thing. Like, didn't really care, just put it in my config and just don't make me think about it. And so I'm not going to tell you don't fight. I'm going to propose a different fight for you to have. So you could fight maybe instead about a position on the div element versus the native semantic HTML element. So you could technically add a role of heading and an ARIA level to your div and have it be fine. But you could also use a page, an H1, which, okay, so if you're the kind of developer or engineer who has the tabs versus spaces fight, it also makes sense that you would care about how many characters are being printed in your markup. So which one of these is really better? Which one is really fine? Now, if I'm going to have to get behind a fight, that's not maybe Black Panther versus Gold Jaguar, then a fight about semantic HTML and not semantic HTML is probably the one I prefer. And this is, of course, if you must fight. Really, it should be more like Thor versus Hulk in Ragnarok, where they fight, but they're still friends at the end. And it was still a totally epic fight. Anyway. I wonder if this is a place, though, where perhaps we could all improve. And maybe not improve. Maybe I could be even gentler. I wonder if this is a place where we could permanently solve this. If you're going to use divs, figure out how you're going to get the ARIA markup in there. I've heard a lot of younger developers say to me, this is the modern web, it's not going anywhere. And while I don't agree, I think the context and history of the web and knowing what I call the holy trinity, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, those are all fundamentally important to being able to create accessible applications, and not just accessible applications, but really good ones. If you disagree, then okay, but still solve the problem. Solve it a different way. It would be beneficial for us all to resolve this because we're excluding users, right? Of course, this is Ember, and famously, there is an add-on for that, is something we say in the Ember community. There's a standing joke that most Ember conference talks are, here's a problem, here's how you solve it, and oh, by the way, here's the add-on that solves the problem. I'm not necessarily doing that today because there are some problems that we need to solve as a web community, not just as an Ember community, but as a web community. And Ember does already have some solutions, though. There is Ember A11y, which gives relevant focus to your views and outlets. Ember A11y testing, which is built on top of Axe Core, thank you to Q, and takes it a little bit farther for Ember developers. Ember A11y landmarks. So single page applications typically wrap their application in a div and put that div in the body. But because they do that, some of the landmark navigation regions or elements require extra roles to be added. So that's what this add-on does. Although, as a side note, Ember is going to be making it so you can opt out of that wrapping div. So that's a big win for accessibility. There is A11y announcer, which tells you what route you're on when you switch routes. There's Ember CLI template lint, which helps make sure we've got some extra accessibility rules written into the linter to help developers before they even ship any code to make it more accessible. And Ember component attributes, which is kind of a stopgap while we revisit how to handle attributes in components. But this one is, if you're working with Ember or you are an Ember developer, this is going to be your biggest, fastest accessibility win. It allows you to add HTML attributes to existing components. Big win. So there are some add-ons for accessibility in Ember, but there's not nearly enough, or there's some problems that I think we could solve at a deeper level. So if you are a problem solver, or if you are doing these, maybe you could make some of these a criteria for your code. Maybe you could make sure that for your add-on, if it's relevant, keyboard navigation must be there. Focus management support must be there. Attribute support must be there. You are actively choosing to use semantic HTML. And then the last thing I want you to keep in mind is to remember that you're not alone. You might not know how to do this, and guess what? You don't have to pretend that you do, because you just don't know how to do it yet. So remind yourself you're not alone. This isn't just your responsibility. You can learn how to make accessible Ember add-ons and applications, or any single page application work. And if you get stuck, ask. I still get stuck. I still have to ask. I ask all the time. New things are coming out all the time that help me do this better, faster. It's fine to ask. Please don't get stuck in this. I can't ask because people will think I'm a noob. I mean, you could get stuck there if you wanted to, but you also don't have to get stuck there. And I can tell you that I have benefited greatly from not getting stuck there. You can also ask, there are accessibility Slack chats. We even have a accessibility channel in the Ember Community Slack chat. And we figure things out together. Sometimes people ask questions and I don't know the answer to them. So there's that. And then whether you've figured it all out or not, I want to encourage you to be magnanimous. I love this word, because this word means we're gracious, but we still have our confidence. We're giving and kind and compassionate, but we still have a little bit of ego. I like to think about it kind of like Aquaman. You know, he's very giving and he's kind of hot stuff and he knows it. That's okay. We're engineers. Like, we do these hard things. So that's okay. But be magnanimous, be generous and compassionate of spirit and of mind. And let's do this. So let's think bigger. That's my challenge. So let's magnanimously solve the hard problems in single page applications or in the web in general. Because these are the kinds of solutions that we need to be solving. Every other day, it feels like somebody's inventing a new framework or someone's claiming, oh, Ember is dead, which I can tell you it's very much not. So we don't need another JavaScript framework, maybe contribute to the ones that exist, maybe make those better, or maybe solve these problems for your favorite JavaScript framework. Solve passwords for the world. That would be great too. And get involved. I have a friend named Jetta, and she says inspiring things to me. One of the things she said to me is, if you want to show up big, you have to be big. And that's one of the things I love about Ember, is it's very ambitious. It just shows up big. It has all the things, and that can be intimidating for some, but for others of us, it's not. It's like, oh, we've been waiting for this our whole lives. This is awesome. And that's really the crux of my story, though, is that I got involved. I showed up. I decided to lean in and be this person and do these things. And my future story is that I'll stay involved, and I'll keep inviting everyone else to be involved, because we can do this. And that's the end of my presentation part today. If you come to the Ember Community Slack, you can find me at Mel Sumner. And on Twitter, I am Melanie R. Sumner. And if you're ever in Chicago, please do look me up, because I'd love to meet you. Thanks.
Could you go over some of the main differences between maybe Ember, which is, as you said, more of like the grandfather of JavaScript, versus some of the newer flavors? Is there a big difference, or is one more accessible than the other, or maybe it just depends?
I think it depends on your use case. I would say Ember has always had this phrase of convention over configuration. It's really leaned into the abstractions that help you deliver business value faster. You can spin up an Ember application just by following the guides or tutorials in less than a day. It's crazy. Not crazy, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. It's absolutely fascinating and awesome, and I love it. I think maybe a better mental model for modern web development is zero config. Like, the Ember team has done Ember community has done such a fantastic job of, okay, so you're going to build something for your startup or something for your business. What are the pieces you already need to have? What are the things you already need to work? I think sometimes some of the more modern JavaScript frameworks are, or the newer ones, I should say, because Ember is just as modern as anybody. The newer ones tend to sort of focus on these arbitrary performance benchmarks, or how small is the package, which that's fine if that's what you want to do. But when you look at what the size of your app is after you've put in all the things you already need to have, they're pretty much the same size. And that's kind of that's a little bit, I suppose, of a frustrating thing for people to think, oh, you're old-fashioned, outdated. It's like, no, could not be farther from the truth. So I would encourage everybody, if you haven't looked at Ember lately, this would be a fantastic time to look at it, because things have never been cooler. And the stuff that we have planned just make me super excited to be involved. So.
Sounds exciting. And along those lines, how do people get involved with Ember if they want to learn more about Ember accessibility or just Ember in general?
That's a great question. I'm actually going to share my screen again really quickly, because on the Ember website, if you go to emberjs.com/community, you'll see great ways to get involved in Ember. We have a discussion forum, we have a community Slack chat. You could ask questions on Stack Overflow. You probably won't find a ton of questions there because most people find that once they start using Ember and they read the guides, they just don't have a lot of questions. The guides are really well written, and the folks on the learning team, especially shout out to Jen Weber, who has just done such an incredible job of the content, like increasing the quality of the content. And if someone says, I can't find something, this doesn't make sense, she'll actually go in and update the guides along with a few of the other people on the learning team to make them better. So Stack Overflow, you might not necessarily find what you're looking for just because it doesn't need to be there. We do have an Ember.js Times newsletter, which is fantastic. Jessica, Jordan, and Amy Lee, and some of the other Ember Learning Team folks they do a great job at making it funny and approachable. There's always some jokes in there. So, and it's a great way to keep up with what's happening right now in Ember. So if you haven't checked out Ember in a while, this would be a great place to check out what we're doing. Also, Chris Van Houten has an excellent blog series on building accessible components. I love to share this one with everyone because he's got 8 parts here, and he says he's about to write another one about modals. This is really great because it really gives people what they need to build accessible things. And this is something that other JavaScript frameworks could even look at and say, oh, what parts could we do too? And then, of course, on my own blog, I have an accessibility category where people could get started learning those things. So hopefully that's helpful.
That is very helpful. I didn't realize that you guys had so many ways to get involved and resources. Rachel was just noting that she agrees that the documentation is really great. So far, she feels like she's been learning Ember faster than other frameworks, and maybe it is because of that community and that documentation that you guys have set out.
Yeah.
And I did just ask Christopher if we could post a link to that website. Oh, there you go. The one that you just demoed. And if you want to put yours on there too, Melanie, the chat will be recorded, the conversation, the sidebar conversation as well, and posted on the YouTube channel when your video goes up.
Great.
So everyone will have access to those links. So that's great. And looks like we had a question from Scott Winkle. Would something like a password manager help with the password issue? Autofill might be a good solution. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, hey, let's chat, Scott. It could be, yes. I don't know. I think the people that can answer that question best are the people who need to use assistive technology. We can't simulate. I don't want us to assume that we can figure this out for them. I think I want us to figure this out with them, with the people who are have low sight or people who are blind. What would help you the most? Have we stopped to ask that question? Like, okay, so when they tell us that, then let's have that back and forth. I think a lot of times we get into these silos, and that's detrimental for everyone. We need to understand that the gaps that exist between all of us are artificial, and they might be useful for an HR, like to pay your salary, but they're not really useful when it comes to creating a truly accessible product that takes the involvement of all of us. And also, side note, something is really important to me. Please pay the people that you're asking to help you along with these solutions. Advocate for them to be hired as your experts, because that's who they are and that's what they deserve. So.
Well, and one question, I don't know if Rachel wants to speak about this at all, but she did mention earlier in the conversation when you were talking about some things that maybe need to be solved, that she uses a screen reader, she uses a screen reader, but she doesn't use one with a keyboard echo, and passwords haven't been a thing that she's considered an issue. So it may not be for all assistive technologies or all users of assistive technology. It may be maybe
great
specific settings or whatnot.
That's great to hear. Yeah.
It sounds like I missed a question here from Scott about why the role presentation on the Elmo image.
That's a great question. Because the spec says so. So we need to let assistive technology know that it's not just that we forgot to add add alt text there. It's that, no, this is specifically just for presentation, and it doesn't add any meaningful value to someone who needs to hear everything spoken out.
Okay, hopefully that answered your question, Scott. And then it looks like Roswell J was just kind of pointing out that the autofill that we were talking about earlier is in WCAG 2.1 guidelines that should be coming out. So again, it's probably like a dealer's choice situation where there's a lot of different ways to maybe make things accessible, and it just depends on the specific situation or assistive technologies that you're testing with,
Sure.
et cetera. But I'm glad that we have a lot of options. Sometimes we are a little paralyzed by having too many options, but at least it's better than no options.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of WCAG 2.1, can I just say, like, I get chills when I think about it. I'm so excited about it. I'm excited about the ways it's going to better support modals and toggles, those kinds of things. That's super exciting to me. So I really can't wait for that.
Yeah, they keep pushing the date around a little bit there, but hopefully they'll come out soon and we'll be able to.
Yes, if you're listening, we need it. Please give us.
Definitely. Well, that's some really great conversation. If anyone else has any questions, post them now. I'll double check on Twitter, but I posted earlier too that if you have any more questions, follow-up questions for Melanie Sumner, you can tweet her at Melanie Sumner on Twitter. She's also on GitHub, LinkedIn, as she said before, to Ember channels as well. So there's a lot of W3C Slack. I know you can find her just about everywhere.
Yeah. I would say please do consider Ember if you haven't. I'm going to say that one more time, and not just because I just joined the core team, but you know, I really think accessibility is helped best by the tooling and the culture, and that's two areas where Ember is very strong. You don't have to be, sometimes we use this phrase special snowflake, and like you don't have to know a ton of JavaScript to start using Ember or to start being shipping business value. And we're even working on some new ROCs, so if anybody has ideas, please do come join us about more inclusive testing methods. I know they're doing something similar in the React community, and things like that are really important. So just a little plug, like culture, tooling, Ember has both of those things. So feel free to come join us. We'd love to have you.
Thank you very much, Melanie, for taking your time to talk about accessibility in general and Ember specifically. Again, just a reminder that the Ally Talks happens every month. We'll have another one next month with maybe a different topic. But for now, we are so excited that you were able to join us, and we'll post the recording on the YouTube channel and the chat transcript as well. And if you have any additional questions for Melanie, please find her in one of the various places that she's located. And I'm sure she'll be happy to answer your questions.
Delighted. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, everyone.